the most interesting thing in impact. At C2 Montreal, a really fascinating set of conversations on narrative landscaping, exploring how narrative shape and reshape our worldviews and mental models every day. And the notion of narrative is showing up in a range of conversations and experiences here at C2, from sessions that explore neurodivergence to sustainability in business to urban housing. There is an emerging energy around mapping one's narrative landscape. And a narrative landscape it's sort of like a map of the harmful and helpful narratives that affect how people think about, talk about, and make decisions about your idea, program, product, or cause. One of the conversations I was engaged in on was housing narrative. And for social purpose teams focused on housing, for example, you might identify harmful narratives like paternalism or deservedness, or helpful narratives like abundance or collective power or friendship. And the thing is, changing the big stories we tell ourselves about how the world works is a complex and challenging task. So knowing your context is essential. Narrative landscaping seems to be taking a really neat sort of journey when it comes to creating a narrative change plan or enabling movements for narrative change. But the idea of narrative landscapes is that it forces us to think about our work in context. I also got the sense that narrative landscaping helps people understand each other better, deepen trust, and build really good, genuine relationships. It can get your team on the same page about the goals you need in your narrative change effort and give you some guide rails for the narratives that you want to avoid and help you sketch out helpful narratives that you may want to advance. Now, all of this genuinely is critical when it comes to enabling lasting social change. I often wonder, what's the deeper narrative under the messages and stories we're being told? What's the narrative expression of an underlying value or a particular worldview? And what I've picked up is that there seems to be three reasons for any team to do narrative landscaping. First, to collectively identify what harmful narratives you're up against, because otherwise you're likely to repeat harmful narratives unintentionally. And harmful narratives are insidious and entrenched and can feel immobilizing. These sometimes are the dominant narratives that hold back your vision. Number two, it's not enough to know what narratives you're up against, but more importantly, perhaps, narrative landscaping forces us to name what we're for. Because identifying and critiquing the current narrative is important, but insufficient. And a third, building shared understanding of the capacities needed in your teams to shift narrative. How are you going to socialize this narrative among all of your diverse stakeholders? How are you going to observe how new narratives are being received? And you can tell I am super intrigued by narrative landscaping and its potential for equipping changemakers to imagine new and shift dominant narratives. And it should really be embedded in social purpose teams around the world. That's the most interesting thing in impact. I'll see you again soon.